Welcome to Meet the Musician, a series in which I asked 5 independent musicians a load of questions to dive into their musical journey. In today's episode, we're going to be hearing from Erin and Lauren, 2 inspiring women from Texas, America, who play as part of Greybloom, the post-hardcore, post-rock, post-everything new breakout act. Erin and Lauren have a really unique way of writing and piecing together the music that is Greybloom, and a real passion, not just for music, but for art in general that inspires and informs them. So grab a drink, a snack, an easy chair, and let's settle in and hear from Erin and Lauren.
That's funny.
Erin, Lauren, thank you for joining me. Look, just before we get into some soul-searching questions, tell us all about yourselves.
So I'm Lauren. I do vocals in Greybloom and write lyrics.
And I'm Erin. I play guitar and kind of do more of the arranging side for all of our songs in Greybloom.
So let's just shout that out. So Greybloom is the band that Erin and Lauren both in. If you haven't heard them before, which you may not have done, fairly new band. Just tell us a little bit more around your new release. So you just released a new EP.
So the EP is called Widow's Weeds. It's a 5-song EP. 2 of the songs we had previously released as singles. First one was actually like a year ago. And then about another 6 months, we dropped the second single. And then now we have done the whole 5-song EP. So we've chosen to kind of label ourselves as post-hardcore. But I feel like we pull from a lot of influences and a lot of genres. And to me, every song on the EP is honestly pretty different. And that's kind of intentional. Like we have a lot of influences, and we didn't want to try to fit into one box. And I feel like, we talk about that with post-rock all the time. It's about you can kind of just do what you want and slap post on it, and there you go.
Yeah.
But obviously we love the heavier side. So pulling from hardcore and metalcore, but then we also equally love more of the ambient and post-rock kind of side, and sort of trying to mesh those together. Particularly pulling from kind of more early 2000s sort of metalcore bands and the stuff that we grew up on.
Like who?
So, Under Oath, Misery Signals. Who else? Those are the two. Those are
the pretty big ones, right?
Yeah, those are the big ones for me. Deftones.
Yeah, even Deaf Heaven.
Deaf Heaven, yeah. So as far as a lot of the riffage and stuff, that's where a lot of the influence comes from, is that stuff that I cut my teeth on growing up. Didn't ever try writing or playing anything in that style until a year and a half ago, when Lauren was like, hey, you want to start a heavy project with me? And I was like, sure, I've never done it before, but let's go for it. But we both grew up in the scene and listening to these bands and going to shows for forever. So we're really passionate about the music. So I was kind of all right, let me just get some inspiration and just try it and see what happens. So that's kind of how it's come about. She's also very good about giving direction as far as what she wants each song to sound like sonically, and kind of the layout of how she hears the song progressing, and I want there to be a breakdown here, or I want this to be very
that's really interesting. So what's the process then? So Lauren, are you sort of coming up with a vision and then hitting Erin up and saying, I've got a vision for a song, go write the song, and then I'll tell you if it's any good or not?
Yeah,
go with
yeah, pretty much. Basically. Well, when we started writing, I would write lyrics just in my notes, app on my phone, or if I have a notebook available, I'll just write down ideas. And when we agreed to just start writing for Greybloom, that's when I took song structures a little bit more seriously, and just figuring out the lyrics and where's the verse gonna be, where's the chorus gonna be. I don't know, just whenever I write the words, I look for imagery and metaphor of, if this word was a sound, what would that sound be?
Do you start with lyrics and then you create a sound from lyrics?
Yes.
That's really
Every
interesting.
song has been written that way.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's kind of the reverse of most bands with lyrics in.
Yeah. I'm open to the other side. If Erin ever has a riff or a melody in mind, I'm very open to doing that direction as well. But with this, I think because I was in such a writing, a groove with writing, and I knew the concept of whatever album that we released, I was focused on like those certain themes. And I was like, here's kind of what I'm imagining when I'm writing these words and what I'm hearing. And I wanted like the EP to kind of just be an assortment of sounds. So that way we can learn and experiment and find what is our unique sound
Yeah.
and challenge our skills as well,
Yeah.
which it definitely did. And like, I feel like we definitely have grown already through the writing process.
Erin, how is that to have someone sort of not dictate? I'm sure it's not. Well, maybe it is like that way. I don't know, but to almost give you, you know, that vision and imagery, and then you go and sort of pull some music together that fits that.
I actually enjoy it and appreciate it a lot. Like I feel like otherwise I would just kind of be floating in limbo. And I mean, obviously I've written songs that way before where I'll get a riff or an idea or a progression and I'll just go from there. But it's very helpful to have the guidance from her because, you know, because it's not an instrumental project, like the lyrics are very important. And I do want the sound to like support the lyric and like the concept and the message of each song, right? So it's been very, very helpful. Most of the songs, I think all of them really, except for Moonglade, all of the other 4 songs, when she sent me lyrics, she had with each little section, like, this is what I want to hear right here. And this is where I hear this building. And like, this is where I hear it opening up into like this big, like heavy section. Yeah. So then that gave me like a great framework. I didn't feel boxed in at all, but I definitely had like a map sort of guiding me as I would like write my parts and just following that direction.
Blow me away, actually. I've never heard of it done that way before. So that's really, really interesting. Do you feel like you found your unique sound yet, or do you feel like you're still searching for that?
I would say we have found a very unique sound already, and we're already carving a little path in like the post-genre world. We've had some of our friends, after listening to the EP, just explain that like, I've never heard anything like this before. It's different. It's unique. Just keep listening to it over and over. And it's like, okay, well, that's a really good feedback. And we're going to probably stick with that. I'm also really open to exploring, just being very experimental, like with sounds, as long as it's, you know, we're maintaining like the heavy, groany vibes mixed with kind of like the lighter tones, like how I kind of see our future writing could be. So
I think the thing that struck me, and I've listened to your EP about 6 times fully through since it came out Friday. It's dead catchy as well. It's really catchy, but it's actually really heavy. And I don't normally find heavy music catchy.
Right.
It's more of a term I'd associate with more pop music or whatever, right? But it's got aggressive hooks that aren't like sellout hooks. They're kind of like, they just ace. And it's lodged in my brain. So
wow, thank you.
So I guess it's my roundabout way of saying you're onto a sound, like, so just keep going down that path for at least a little bit longer. That was one of my questions, was what's your creative process? You've just answered that, I think, in a really interesting way. Let's just go back in time a little bit, and obviously it'll be different for both of you. Just be good to hear a little bit about your musical backstory. I suppose you kind of told us about the last 18 months of working together leading up to this point, but what's before that?
My journey with music, it started like, I grew up in church, and I was a part of like church choir. So it started with singing. My singing started there, like being involved in choir, and I was mostly alto, even like tenor sometimes. I have a hard time getting to soprano, but that's like my range. Throughout the years, I started playing violin when I was 9 years old, and I took lessons for about 5 years. And throughout that journey, I grew a love for like string instruments. So I know how to play an acoustic guitar and bass, and I was involved with like worship bands in the churches I was like involved in, and would play string instruments there and continue on with like singing in choir.
Yeah.
After like high school, on to college, I did start in a music degree, and I took 1 semester of music theory. And that just like, that was a very hard class, because like the only theory I've been taught was through taking violin lessons. But that was like a whole other language that like, it was very difficult. Yeah. For some reason, I just thought like, I see music being a hobby. I don't know if I really see this being like a career. Like, I just didn't really understand what my part or place was.
Yeah.
So I switched degrees and then I just kept writing. Like, I would play solo music throughout college at like open mic nights and stuff like that with my acoustic guitar. And then after I was done with school, that's when I started getting more into writing, like just poetry. On my days off from work, I would spend my free time going to coffee shops or parks or whatever and just write and just get words flowing. And I have pages upon pages of just of words. And I was like, man, this could be something someday. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is, but like I love writing and I love exploring the poetic side of lyrics.
Is it just like whatever comes into your mind, or you write in poems or stories, or is it just feelings and emotions? What is it?
It's mostly like I would say poems, with the focus on songwriting though. Like for this EP specifically, it's a mixture of personal reflection and my spiritual journey, but also the song Born from Water, that is explicitly about an episode from the show The Haunting of Bly Manor. And I think it's episode 8. I think it's
Oh,
like called The Lady of the Lake or something. But
yeah.
if I were to write for a soundtrack someday, what would that look like? How would I do that? And so Born from Water is that
Yeah.
perspective.
What are
And
you,
then
what are you singing, Lauren, at the end of what's that round that you both? Because you sing on that, Erin, as well, don't you? Well, it's definitely the best outro I've heard this year for sure, by a mile. But it's just what are you singing? What are the lyrics at that part?
Okay, so that round, wow, I'm forgetting now.
Where I am, there you must also be.
Yeah.
That's like a quote
Oh,
from
yeah.
the show, right?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a quote from the show. And it's a quote from like the mother or the lady of the lake saying that to like her child. Because yeah, it's a beautiful, heartbreaking but beautiful story. But I wanted that line to sound like she was talking through water, like she was at the bottom of the lake,
Yeah.
with the water. She's trying to speak to her daughter, but she has
Right.
no way of speaking because she has no face. And it's like, what would that sound like? So I pitched the idea of what if we can make this a round, because a round kind of has this rhythmic, like ripple effect that to me resembles water, like an echoing of
Oh,
water.
yeah. It's even
Yeah.
better now you're explaining it. It's like, yeah.
Yes.
Well, good job, by the way, because if that was the imagery you had, then yeah, you smashed it. It's an awesome end to a good song.
So very similar to Lauren, I also grew up playing in church. So everyone in my family is musical. Both of my parents were the worship leaders in like every church we were ever in growing up. And I have 2 sisters. So we all like kind of came out the womb singing.
Yeah.
I started in piano lessons when I was super young. And then I didn't stick with piano like very intently through my whole upbringing, but I was just kind of in and out of it for a while. And then when I was 12, I was like, I'm going to start playing guitar. So I am completely self-taught on guitar. So yeah, I got my first guitar when I was 12 and also just started teaching myself playing in church. I played in band through middle school and high school. I played flute a little bit. But basically had experience.
That is one of the most rock and roll instruments, though, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Did marching band, the whole shebang. It was awesome. And then kept singing through that whole time. And then when I was a senior in high school, I was like, let me explore like the vocal ensemble side. So I joined choir. And then from there, when I went into college, I knew I wanted to pursue a music degree. So at that point, I kind of switched over to studying vocal music exclusively. So I was still playing guitar and stuff, but that's when I started vocal lessons and singing in choirs and stuff. So my degree is in vocal music education. Yeah, so in high school, my first job was actually working at the local music store in my hometown, and I taught some lessons. And I've kind of always wanted to do that as my job, but I kind of just did it on the side for a really long time. And now it is my full-time job, which is rad. I played in a band in college with one of my sisters and a bunch of our buddies. We literally formed like a cover band essentially to play like a school event, like a talent show sort of thing. And we were like covering Mumford and Sons. So it was like kind of a folk band sort of deal. And at that point I was Pretty much just playing acoustic. Like I had played on an electric guitar in middle school and high school, but then once I got into college, I was like, I don't really have an outlet to play these, so I was just playing acoustic primarily. That band was really fun. Like I played in that band for quite a few years. We released an EP, so it was kind of like indie folk, indie rock
Harmonies.
sort of vibes. Yeah. So I ended up switching to an electric as we sort of like changed our sound a little bit. But all through that whole time, like I really only considered myself a rhythm guitarist for like most of my playing. And a lot of that was just like, I knew that was something I could do really well. And I was scared to push myself to like do anything else and fail.
Yeah.
Because I'm a perfectionist. So I kept myself boxed in and like really limited my ability for a long time. And it really wasn't until the pandemic that I started to dabble in trying to play some of the music that I've always really enjoyed and wanted to play. So more into the post rock and like even started delving into sort of like Midwest emo, math rock, prog kind of stuff. And then at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, when Lauren had approached me about wanting to do this project, I was like, okay, I just have to go for this. Like, I know I have so much more potential than what I'm like allowing myself to do. And it's just because I'm scared and I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing. But again, it's like, I'm a teacher, and it's like the only way to learn how to do something is to fuck it up a few times. Yes. And you just have to stick with it, and eventually you will grow and get better. So I was like, okay. So beginning of last year, as we started trying to write songs, like I also just started learning a bunch of random songs from all sorts of genres of bands, stuff that I really loved and had always wanted to play and never thought I could, but I was like, screw it, I'm just going to go for it. And, over time, I was able to learn that stuff. And just by doing that alone over the course of last year, like my playing grew further in that time alone than in like the almost 20 years of playing all up before that point. So everything on the EP, a lot of those riffs and stuff that I wrote, it's like, I don't even know how they came about, sort of. I'm like,
I know how they came about. Lauren told you what to do.
That's kind of true, yeah.
The next question I want to ask is around inspiration, or there are, whatever it might be. What's at the root cause of the music that you two make together?
Okay. Man, that's such a good question. I guess like I'm inspired by poetry because it creates like a connection that just regular dialogue sometimes doesn't portray. In poetry, it's like this other second language that when you write something and you create these like beautiful imageries, a lot of people connect it in their own personal way. And I find that poetry to translate better in songs. I just focus on like what moves me, like post-rock, post-hardcore moves me, like this heavy, fast-paced, but even like slow drone, like it just creates this space of connecting with yourself. And I think that inspires me a lot because a lot of our world and society, it is so much about disconnecting from who you are. I love when like musicians or whatever like medium that artists use, they use that to portray a message, to speak a certain truth that often goes unseen. But when you do it in a way that like sticks out and it's like, hey, we have something to say here, and there's a certain urgency to this message. Some artists that inspire me I love like heavy music, but I also listen to a lot of like softer singer-songwriter music. So like Valley Maker, like he's like a folk acoustic songwriter, but I'm inspired by his lyrical writing. And Emma Ruth Rundle and Chelsea Wolfe, they also have a really beautiful way of portraying like the spiritual connection behind words. That's very compelling to me.
I missed this at the start. You're clearly a big poetry fan. You like poetry, yeah? That's you. Yeah, awesome. Have you got a favorite poet?
Yeah, I've been reading, his name is W.H. Auden. He's from England. He was one of the great contemporary poets in like the 20th century. kind of during the movement of during like the World War. He wrote a ton of poetry about what he was observing in the world, how he relates to all of that. So yeah, W.H. Auden is really cool. Fun fact about our band name is that it's from a poem by Robert Frost that Erin found.
Yeah, I'm not big into poetry. A lot of times it's like too heady for me, and I'm just like trying to decipher this is like a lot. But I really do enjoy Robert Frost, and I have a book of his poems. When we were trying to come up with a name, I was like, let's just like flip through some, see what we come across. So I'll have to find the poem. I don't even remember what poem it's from. Yeah. I came across that like word of Greybloom, and I think he had actually written it that way with like no break. I was like, ooh, this is dope. And then the name wasn't taken. So we were like, yeah, let's go. Yeah.
It also looks cool as well. It's which I think is important for any sort of artist, really. I think it's got to kind of just look right. What's your inspiration for this band, this project? When you're sat in the room, you've got your instrument in hand and you're looking to record, aside from Lauren's notes, what are you drawing upon?
A lot of it is bands that I listen to, and like she's saying, bands that move us. So there's quite a few riffs on the record where I don't want to say I like ripped off a band, but there were very certain, like there's a specific feeling or a specific tone that I wanted to go for, and I would try to think of a song or an artist that drew out that feeling and just, put my spin on it or put my expression. But like I'm the culmination of like all of my influences, right? So I think it's still me, but like all of these bands and artists that I have grown up listening to and have played a big part in my life, like that's all a big part of me. So I definitely have to give credit where credit's due. Like that plays a huge part in what I end up writing, and like the sounds I'm able to achieve is the inspiration from all those bands that I love. And then part of it too is just like I really enjoy just like, the thing we love about post rock, I think, is like the space that it creates. So as much as I love like the cool, like fast, riffy, shreddy bits and stuff, like the moments where I'm able to just sort of like layer sound and just give that like space in that room for you to just sit in a sound for a minute. So like the intro of Stage is like a good example of that, how it's just like this very big, deep, ethereal reverb guitar part, and I layer some melody in there, and then that all just goes for like over a minute before the vocal even comes in. So very much so about like creating space and just leaving room for you to just sit in something.
And that's super important though. You've talked about the light and the shade, but oftentimes it's what isn't there that is as important as what is there. You got to create that space to breathe. What's the hardest part of being an independent artist?
The money.
Yeah, probably the money, financial side of things.
What money?
Yeah, exactly. What money?
Yeah,
because I mean, and even with independent bands, like there's usually more members for them to split costs and stuff between, right? But with us, it's just the two of us. So so we split everything equally between the two of us. But we DIY a lot of stuff, and thankfully we have a lot of friends from all parts of the industry who have been helping us out with a lot of stuff. So like we track everything at home, and then we send it off to be mixed and mastered by a friend of ours. So that helps a lot.
Who is that?
Jeremy Schaefer. So
shout him out. This could be winning in business now. You saying that, right?
Yeah.
Well, he has a studio. He's in a band called Earthgroans, and he tours all the time.
Yeah.
But he also has a studio at his home in South Dakota, and he's booked constantly.
Yes.
So he does very well, and he does really, really good work. Busy most of the time, and he obviously does. I mean, he does amazing work. Yeah, it's great. He's actually the reason Lauren and I got connected. We've both known him for a really long time through the scene. And then, he connected us when we both ended up moving to Dallas. He was like, oh, y'all should hang out and be friends. We're like, oh, okay. But yeah, he's amazing. He does the mixing and mastering on everything and does a little bit of production stuff too. Our stuff is not like really heavily produced, but he has done a little bit of stuff on the songs, which I think has made them sound rad.
How's that work?
Yeah, not even all, most of the time, no. Like on the first 2 singles, we just tracked everything and then sent it to him. And then he was just like, he just kind of does his thing. On those, we didn't even really ask for anything specific as far as the production. We just trust him and his taste, and he just like did his thing, and we ended up loving it, and it was great. So it kind of worked out the same way with the 3 new songs on the EP. Pretty much with him, it's like we will maybe just have a few mix notes here and there, but like he's very good at what he does, and I think he also just knows like what we're going for.
So you're outsourcing your mixing, your mastering, photography, all that sort of stuff's being done by other people, right? So you're working jobs, you're earning money, you've got, I guess, rent or bills and life to pay for. Then you've got this, I'm going to say the word hobby, but super serious hobby that you're really passionate about and invested in that then costs money. So why do you do this? What's your drive?
I do it because it's a creative outlet for me. It's a way of like making space for myself to be authentic and to express my frustrations of what's going on in the world and frustrations in my life, but also like a way to acknowledge the good that's still happening as well, and just to create something beautiful. I do it because it also makes me feel good. And
Erin, what about you? Why do you, I don't know, you obviously do other musical bits and pieces too, but why do you do all this, right? The time, the money, the energy, what's it mean to you?
Well, for me, like, I don't consider myself much of like a talker. I'm very much like an internal processor. And for me, like music has always been that safe space for me to like feel and process things, and also like expressing myself. I feel like I can channel and express my emotions more through playing something sometimes than trying to verbalize it. So selfishly, like that's part of it. But then also like, you know, I just love and I'm so passionate about music. Like it's everything to me. All of my closest friendships in my life are people that I have met through music and through shows in the community. So just, you know, wanting to be a part of that and wanting to create that space for us to be able to connect with other people, and hopefully providing music that can do that for someone else's life is like mind blowing.
Can I add one more thing?
Lauren, you can say what you want. You don't have to put your hand up either. So go for it.
It just, what Erin was saying maybe reminded me of like another thing that is like a driving force to like why we're doing our serious hobby. But like representation matters to us, and like not saying we want to be like the poster child or like the face of women in music, because obviously we're not the first women to be doing this music, but I believe it's important to keep the representation going, to keep we have like a foot in this genre, and that will hopefully inspire, or like you know younger girls seeing us, or even people who are like non-binary or identify in like their own way. They're seeing other people taking the platform of, you know, owning their creativity and expressing it, no matter what other people are saying or what other people think. We're still a part of the movement of, you know, everyone should have a place in music.
What does success look like for the both of you with Greybloom?
Man, so success to me personally is like being honest to myself, just being true to who I am, showing up for myself in even the smallest ways, and like being a part of Greybloom so far has just opened to a lot of like how to take care of myself physically and mentally, being open to relationships and friendships again, and not keeping myself isolated, knowing when to speak and when to listen. And it's just created a healthier dynamic for me, continuing to find who I am in the music.
And I love how Erin, every question just waits for you to go first so she can think of the answer. She can formulate her answer in her head whilst you're talking.
It's true, though. It's true. Like,
I
really, but yeah, my answer is kind of the same thing. It's like, to me, success is just like being fully yourself and not compromising yourself, doing what you want to do and pursuing what makes you happy and what fulfills you. So to me, I'm like, we are already successful. Like, we don't need any more streams. We don't need money. We don't need any of that bullshit. Like, that's all nice. Like, of course, everyone wants people to hear what they're making, and like, that's great, but that's just like a bonus, because the fact that we have made something that we are super proud of and we feel is true to who we are and expresses things that we want to share, and we enjoy it. Like, I've listened to the EP many, many times since it's been released, because I'm just like, this slaps. Like, I love it. That alone, and then like the connections and the friendships that we've made through it. Already we're successful.
And the ones you haven't yet that you will, right? Because that's that's exciting too. Thanks for doing it. And I'm conscious that it's your day off, Lauren, I think, as well. So I'm taking up like an hour of your day off. So apologies. And apologies, I was late again. Lots of apologies. There's more apologies than I've given all year in the last hour. Just so you know.
It is my day off. I don't have much planned. I will probably just need to do a lot of catching up, like groceries and laundry.
Yeah, all that fun stuff.
I started knitting yesterday. So I might be knitting. Who knows?
Knitting?
I don't know.
Damn, what? We've ended the interview. We've ended the interview, and I've missed the best question of all. Tell me about Thanks for watching. The link to Greybloom's EP is down in the comments, so please feel free to give that a spin and check them out. If you want to see any of the other Meet the Musician episodes in this series, then I'll link some here. And of course, if you would do me the pleasure of subscribing and hitting that bell for notifications, then I'd love to see you here back on the channel in future. Thank you for watching.